We are still waiting for other participants. If you can hear me, can you please type on the chat box?
Testing. All right, this is a test. Can you hear me? All right, you're right. I'm just learning how to use the system. Thanks. I apologize. I apologize for that, folks. Still learning how to press all the keys here.
All right, we're gonna start in 2 minutes. Just need to wait for some participants. I will hand you over to Sean in 2 minutes. All right, thank you so much for attending the webinar. I will hand you the floor now to Sean. Go ahead, Sean. You can start the webinar. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. At least this morning where I am over here in Washington, D.C. Today we are talking about L1s and how to begin a business in the U.S. Now, a few preliminary notes. First of all, we have wireless internet in our office here, and sometimes it goes out because it's one of those high-quality office buildings. So if that occurs, I'll log back in again. Please be patient with me in that event. Also, for those of you that have a video link, feel free to turn that on and you can see my smiling face. I'm not sure you're going to get much more than that, but I am here in full effect if that's what you'd like to do. Okay, so why are we talking about this today? Folks often ask us, how can we start operating in the U.S. legally and grow in this market? And they want to get here because it's got a good business environment. There's a lot of money here to get or earn, and it gives you a chance to get involved in our marketing environment, either stock market or investment purposes, as well as to bring folks who can work here and expand your footprint around the world, in this case in the U.S. The problem is, most of the time, it's very expensive to get into the United States. And the real goal of today is to explain how you can do that in cost effective and works. So let's get right into how that happens. We're on page 2 of the slide deck. If you have a copy of that was sent to you, there are 2 main considerations when we talk about L1 and starting operations in the United States. The first one is you have to actually have a company in the U.S. And the second one is you have to send somebody here to run your company or be involved in the company. We'll talk about both steps of that today. The L1 is the visa that that an employee in your company receives in order to work in the U.S. And there are 2 types of L1s. There's an L1 manager and executive, and there's an L1 with specialized knowledge. And we're going to talk about those two tracks here in a minute, but it's just important to recall when we talk about an L1, you're talking about people, folks that are going to come from overseas to work in the United States for a term of 1 year to begin with, but then if your business is successful, for 3 to 7 years thereafter. You should also note that if you come on an L1 in the U.S., and apply for a green card after a period of time. That's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but you should make a note in your books that it's possible to do that through an L1 visa. All right, so if the L1 deals with people, what are we talking about? We talk about business. How does that work? And the answer to that is, in order to bring someone to work in the United States, they have to be doing something for your company. You cannot just send them over here and drop them off at an airport. Or you may have some employees you wish to drop off at the airport. That you cannot do. I'm looking at some of the notes that are being posted here. Is this any better? Can you hear me any better now? I see something's typing. I'll keep going. If you need me to repeat something, let me know. I'm trying to speak in smaller sound bites. I realize this is going around the net, around the world, so there could be some interference there. Okay, so you don't want to just drop your people off at the airport and say, you know, have a nice flight. There has to be a reason for them to come to the United States. And that process of forming a business in the U.S. is done, okay, some can hear and some cannot, okay. For those of you who the sound may not be that great at the moment, Melanie, are we recording this? Are we going to be able to send them a copy? Melanie? Okay, I believe this is being recorded. I see a little blinky light at the top, so I'm pretty sure you guys will all get a copy of this when we're done. So if parts of this do not come through, make sure you request a full copy to be sent to you. Okay, so let's go back. So in order for you to send somebody to the U.S., you got to have a business, and that setup begins before you actually apply for an L1 visa. Of course, you have to have something to send people to. And it begins in 3 distinct areas. And so let's go to, this is here. Let me jump to this in a second. Okay, so starting your U.S. company. Now, this is on slide deck page 5. We're going to go back to some of the things that were before this in a minute, but I want to touch base on starting a company. So the process of doing this is, first you decide you want to work in the U.S., then you create a company in the U.S. Now, you don't actually have to be here to do that. You can hire a law firm to do it for you, and sometimes you can do it yourself. A lot of this is done online. In order to do that, though, you have to have someone in the U.S. that can act as a registered agent. There are folks throughout the U.S. whose job it is to do just that, or if you go through a law firm, so we become that role, but you must have that to start a business in the U.S. And once you form the corporation in the United States, that corporation must be wholly owned by the foreign company. And this is really important. You can't have a U.S. company that is, okay, we're having more voice problems. Melanie, is there a way to confirm our connection here or something like that? I'm concerned that people are saying they can't hear this. Melanie is typing something, okay. I'm showing recording great, strong signal on my side. Not sure what the issue is across this platform. Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering if this is, just as people have written, if this is the net connection. I remind everybody again that this is being recorded and you'll get copies of it, so if parts of this fall out. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to what you need to do. You got to create a company. It has to have a registered agent in the United States, and you need a tax identification number. Once you have those three things, when you file your incorporation paperwork, and we'll talk about that in a minute, when you file your incorporation paperwork, you have to indicate that the company is wholly owned by the foreign subsidiary. Now, what that means is, if you guys are thinking about making a partnership with a U.S. company, you have to be really careful, because for an L1 to work, the company you send your employee to must be majority owned or a subsidiary of the foreign company. So don't make a mistake of getting into a partnership thinking you'll be able to do this if you're not the majority owner. There are some exceptions to this that are outside the scope of our presentation at the moment, but if you think you might have a thing with a partnership, or you're not sure about ownership potential, please contact us. Let's talk you through it, because that gets very complicated. For the purposes of our discussion today, I'm going to presume you're starting your own company. When I say start your own company, I mean start your own subsidiary in the United States. Now, let's be clear, to do that again, you're going to create the company, register that company in the US, you're going to get a registered in the United States, and you're going to get a tax identification number. Now, what state register your company in may depend on where you're planning to do business, what coast you're planning to do work in. At the end of the day, though, it isn't really relevant. You can do work across all 50 United States as long as you have registered your corporation somewhere legally. So the key, that's why I'm not really talking about what states to go into. The key here is you actually have to found your corporation in the US, get a tax ID number, and have a registered agent. Make sure that the foreign company is the majority shareholder of any new U.S. or company you're going to be working with. Okay. A tax ID can be obtained from the IRS in the United States. Now, the next kicker, and you can see we just talked about those things, is C. As you can see on this Power Deck slide I have here, I get to draw it, really, there you go, C. Now, this is another really important thing. During the first year of business operations in the United States, you are not expected to be profitable. You're just starting, for goodness sake. You're trying to break into a market. There is no expectation that you will actually be generating profit, income, even expenses. To the extent that that's true, the law allows you to run in the red. In order to show that you can afford to be in the United States market, you need to invest enough money into the U.S. subsidiary to show that it can afford to run itself in the red. If you do not do that, your application for an L1, or really anything else, will be denied. For the first year, you have to invest enough money to run your company without any profit. And you're going to have to show where you transferred sufficient foreign funds into a U.S. bank to fund the U.S. business. That is a one-way deposit in, and you can't just take it right back out again. That'll void the whole thing. Now, what I mean by voiding? The first year you operate in the U.S., the person who has an L1 is working in that company is not required to show that they're making any money or doing anything out of the ordinary at all. They're just here trying to set up their business. Your visa to be in the United States under an L1 is only good for 1 year when you first apply. Thereafter, you have to file to renew it and renew your right to be in the United States. When you file to renew your visa or renew your firm operations in the U.S., you have to show where you have put, as in is marked here in C, where you have put funds into the company. Those funds were spent to run it for the first year, and it's now successful enough to run on its own. You will be audited. That's why C is so important. Invest enough funds to run it for a year. Now, the amount you have to invest may not be much. It may only be, $20,000 or whatever that equates to currency, wherever you are. It may not be a lot of money if it's a small startup operation. Perhaps all you're going to start is a consulting office. Maybe you're just going to start an import-export office. You don't have to invest millions by any means. In fact, it's corresponding to the size of your business. But you got to be careful. If you intend to bring more than one into work in the business, you have to generate at least enough, you put enough money in there, pay their salaries, and grow the business, whatever kind of business it is. So make sure the amount you invest is corresponding to the type of operation you're running and your payroll. The next, oh, whoops, that didn't work well. The next thing here is under D, and D says you got to have office space. Now, that's not so much a legal requirement under the statute as much as proof that you actually are running a business. Now, in our day and age, especially with President-elect Trump, who is not necessarily as keen on immigration policy as some of our prior presidents have been, it is really important that we show that the intent to set up a business in the United States is genuine. And one mark of that genuineness is real estate. So if you rent an office, you buy an office, you can afford it, or you rent an office space for a period of years, that goes away to show that you intend to actually operate in the United States and run your business here. Do this. Okay, now I'm going to go backwards a little bit here. Now, that's setting up your operations in the U.S. So let's recount that briefly. You have to create a U.S. company. As a foreign entity, that's going to be a C corporation. So you're going to create a C corporation in the United States. You're going to have a registered agent in the state where you incorporated. Typically, that's going to be a law firm such as ourselves, but you can find people on the web that will do it also. The third thing you're going to have to do is get a tax identification number, or an EIN, an employer identification number. You have to have a tax ID to operate in the United States. Those three things create your business. On top of that, you have to have a majority share. The majority shares of that firm have to be owned by the company. You should invest in your firm in the U.S. enough to pay for all of your first year operations. And you should make sure you get office space where you intend to operate. All right, now one one visa, you must have proof of employment. You must have worked at least 1 year of the last 3 years for the foreign company. Now, there's some debate as to whether or not you should have worked for them in their home country, or you could have worked for them somewhere else. But the key is it's got to be outside of the United States. So you can't have worked for them within the United States on some other capacity. You actually have to have worked for them outside of the U.S. So you've got to have proof of that. Now, this can't be a sham. This is very important. You have to show that you have, and ways of doing this, you have to show you had pay stubs from the parent company, the foreign company that shows income. You need bank statements to show that money was actually put in your bank account. You need housing records to show that you lived overseas or you lived where that company was operating. And also, very importantly, you have to have some proof that the work that you did matches the type of work that they're sending you to do in the United States, all right? This establishes your criteria for being allowed to apply to work in the U.S. the L program, L1 in our case. So let's review that again. You have to prove that at least one of the last 3 years you worked for the foreign company outside of the United States. To prove that, you need to have pay stubs and bank statements to show that you were paid and in fact did receive funds. You must show that you lived outside of the U.S. and you must show that you lived where this company operated. You can prove that by a lease or a house or utility bills, things that show you actually did reside where this was happening. Then the third thing is you have to show that you are doing work that is substantially similar in the U.S. to what you had been doing for the foreign company before. And you can prove that through emails and through memorandum and work product, things that prove up the work relationship. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now let's talk about the two different types of L1s that you can get. We mentioned them before. Those are L1 for managerial and executive, and L1 for specialized knowledge. Typically speaking, we recommend that everybody apply for an L1 as an executive. The reason for that is once you're here for a period of time, you can file for what's called an EB1C, which will give you the right to stay in the U.S. as a green card or with a green card permanently. That's explained on this slide. It is and in order to do that, you have to submit certain specific types of paperwork that support that you are, in fact, an executive. And there are terms that go with that. The same goes for specialized knowledge. That is an easier to prove criteria, but you still must show you, in a shocking turn, have specialized knowledge average worker would have. The reason for this is the L program is not designed to send folks here just to stay at your company in the U.S. They want you to hire U.S. people to do that. You're sending folks from your foreign company that are specifically needed to grow the U.S. company. So while you can send more than one L1, you can't staff your whole firm with L1s. And that's why they have these specific L1s that we have to meet. We're going to go over that now. Okay. So to get an L1A, you have to show that you are acting in a managerial, executive, or leadership position within the company. And typically speaking, this is going to involve certain executive functions. And I have a list of them here, and I'm going to go over them now, but if you need more input or you'd like explanations on these, feel free to contact me and I'll go into more depth. But as a rule of thumb, when you submit your L1 package for an executive, you need to include the following. Number one, you need to, now I should say before we start this, you don't have to include every one of these. The more you include, the stronger the application. They will deny apps that do not demonstrate a sufficient number of these, but not necessarily every one of them has to be included. Okay, so the first one of them is budget $300,000 or more. You got to show that your executive has control of money. That's the number one flag on business, right? That's fun. So an executive has control of money. Show that they have control and when I say control, that's discretion to spend without further authority, at least $300,000 or more. Now that number is for a medium-sized business. If you're a small business, you're not going to have a budget of $300,000. That doesn't mean you don't have an executive. It just means that what they control is going to be more in line with your gross funds. If your foreign fund only, if your foreign company only has a net gross of $1 million, your executive may not have authority to spend 30% of the entire company's worth. That's okay, you know. Make sure you scale the amount of their control to something that's in line with your company. But as a rule of thumb for a mid-sized store, 300,000 is a good rule of thumb. Number two, you need to show that the executive has control of at least 2 to 5 other professionals. Now, here's the key. It's not anybody. An executive should supervise other managers, not supervise line staff. All right. This is a key itch point for USCIS. They're the folks that actually approve these applications or review them and approve them. You got to show that you control managers, not just line company. And there's only one L1 in the whole thing, and they're the only employee here because they're starting the company. That's okay. How long is that okay? First year. Remember, for the first year, you get a free pass. You can send someone over here. They're going to have to set up the business. An L1 executive may actually doing work, actual work and sales and all the rest of that stuff for the first year. After that, all of the criteria I'm showing have to be met to renew your L1. It must be met. All right. So going back to number 2. You need to show control of at least 2 to 5 other professionals. Number 3, you need to show that the executive does not work in the operations of the company. Well, as I just explained, during the first year, that one is waived. After year 1, and when you submit to renew your L1, you have to show that you're not doing day-to-day operations. They want to see an executive being an executive, handle day-to-day field operations. Not normally, not unless there's something wrong. Number 4, you have to show that you're paying your executive a salary that's commensurate at A, the size of your company, and B, their job. If you pay your executive, let's say again, you're a $3 million company based in India, I don't know, whatever, and you set up a shop in the US and you fund it with $100,000 to begin operations. You follow all the rules, tax ID numbers, it's all good to go, right? And you send someone here as an L1 to set up operations and you pay them $20,000 a year. That doesn't work. That's not an executive. That's not even a secretary, all right? So make sure that the salary you pay for your L1 shows that you view the L1 as an executive. Typical ranges for a mid-sized firm of 300 or 3 million would be somewhere around 250,000, 300,000. Maybe a little more, maybe. Executives are necessarily operational. Some of them deal with strategic planning. They might be architects. Well, that's more specialized now. They may be PMs. They may be things side decline large million-dollar projects. They may not have anybody working for them. That's just their job. They review it and make the final decision. That is executive. You got to show where the executives have executive authority, and that means the ability to bind the firm. Okay. So let's get on here to slide number 9. The alternative to the executive L1 is the specialized knowledge L1. And usually these fall into one of 3 categories, as you can see on this slide. The first one of them is market penetration folks. So if you send people over to the US and you need somebody who's extremely knowledgeable about the US market and knows where to invest money, how to contact people, inroads, make those relationships through the years. That is somebody with specialized knowledge that is immediately necessary for the business. you can get them approved as an L1B, even though they're not executives. They're all they do is create and maintain business relationships. Frankly, again, I would still apply as an executive anyway, but there you go. All right, business process and product experts. So let's say you sell a highly specialized widget. Good afternoon, everybody. Look at that. All right, let's try this again with my microphone muted on my platform here. Can everybody hear me now? All right, so, I don't know, perhaps it's our internet connection. We're showing all systems green on our side, but unfortunately, I don't know if that means everything is actually working well. So I apologize for the broken and scattered aspect of the presentation so far. So what I'm going to do is highlight again some of the key points that I discussed earlier, just to make sure you all have it. Now, you'll get the presentation, the slide deck, as well as the first part of the recording. So I don't want to spend everybody's time a great deal. I know your time is valuable. And then I'm going to switch to questions you might have. But let me just recap. So going now to page, I'm going to say 5. There we go. The L1 is comprised of 2 different parts. It's the visa aspect where you get your employee into the U.S., and it's the actual establishment of a U.S. operation. You have to set up your U.S. operation first for you to bring someone here to the U.S. to work. And it's kind of obvious, right? So in order to set up an operation in the United States, you need to do a couple of things. Number one is you need to incorporate. And you can pick a state in the U.S. There are 50 U.S. states, and typically speaking, it isn't all that important where you incorporate. There are some tax considerations. There are some operational considerations, so you're going to want to talk to a lawyer about that. However, by and large, you set up shop on the coast where you intend to operate. Now, once you've incorporated, you need a registered agent in the United States. And that typically is a law firm, although you can go online and find some folks in the U.S. that aren't lawyers that do this. That's your choice, but you got to have one. And the third thing you need to do then is you need to, there we go. You need to get an employer identification number or tax ID number to set up operations and conduct business in the U.S. Once you've done those things, you can then move on to bringing your employee into the U.S. However, there are a couple of other considerations that you need to have. The first one is under C, and I've drawn a little circle. Forget the line I drew through that. That's me being really excited with my pen. Sorry, everybody. Now, I don't know how to take that off. But you got to invest in your company. I know this comes as a shock to all of you, but you can't just set up some random shop in the U.S. and wander away. It won't work, right? Obviously. So in order to make this work, you need to put in enough money to run your operations for 1 year. And the reason for that is that during the first year of your L1 status, it's not expected that the company be profitable. Because you're not expected to generate a profit or even pay for yourself, you need to have enough money in the U.S. bank to fund the U.S. company to pay for your L1 and to pay for your staff and pay for your marketing expansion. If you don't have that, at the end of your year 1, when you're audited, you'll get kicked out. So, under C, fund your company. All right. Also, you need to have an office space. And the reason for this is, well, you don't want your L1 to work in the trees. And people don't like strange folks wandering around saying, I'm an executive, doesn't work. Get an office space. You need to show you intend to be permanently in the U.S. As I explained before, there's a new president-elect, and he is not particularly favorable towards immigration policy. So in order to prevent any problems, which may not have been such a big deal in the past, but certainly are going to be going forward, you want to make sure that you can show this is not some kind of a sham operation, that in fact you do intend to set up operations and run your company in the U.S. And one of the ways you show that is you have office space that is in line with the type of business. So if you're a
manufacturing company, you get a warehouse. If you're a consulting company, you get an office. If you're an import-export company, you get something by docks or the airports or so forth and so on, okay? So it's important that you have corresponding space that supports the nature of your business. Okay, one other point to this that I did not mention earlier, but I want to make sure we're clear on here. Under C, when you fund your company, it is really, really important that you trace where the money is coming from. We are in an age now where terrorism is front and center in a lot of folks' minds when we talk in international operations. Anything that is used to fund terrorism, to fund drugs, to fund trafficking, you get the idea. That's verboten. You can't do that, obviously. And so when you bring money into the United States, part of the audit that will be done is to prove those funds are from legitimate business sources. And one easy way to prove that is pay taxes on them in the home country. So if your foreign corporation pays taxes, you've got no problems because you're going to report in your income anyway, and that's considered sufficient. But do expect to be inquired about that. You've got to make sure you show that you have clean money. Okay, so we talked about that. Now, we then jump forward to what's it take to get an L1. Now, L1s are divided into two categories. Alpha category is L1 managerial and executive. That's the one you really want to get everybody into. The reason is that once you get an L1 executive, you can transfer to a green card, that's legal permanent status in the U.S., a year after you're here. That's usually the goal of most L1s when they come here, so they can stay and run the operations in the U.S. permanently. So go for the L1 executive and managerial. There are, however, criteria for that you have to meet, of course. And those criteria that we ran, there are 5 of them, and I ran through them. One is this executive should have substantial control on the company's budget. Substantial control means that their signature is sufficient to write checks for certain amounts of money or to bind certain amounts of money, obligate the company. Typically speaking, in a mid-sized firm of $3 million or more, you're looking at authority to bind for up to $300,000. But that's kind of a made-up number. There's no hard and fast rule on that. It just needs to correspond to the size of your company. Now, if your firm is only $1 million total, then you wouldn't expect any executive to be able to bind 30% of the entire company, right? So it has to be corresponding to the size of the company. But make sure they have control of the budget. Number 2 is they should manage, control, or direct 2 to 5 professionals. Not line people, but supervisors or managers. Number 3, they shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day operations of the company, the line work, right? So they're not going to be building the widgets or making sales calls. That's not what executives do. Oh, they do from time to time they get involved, but that's not their daily task. This requirement is waived for the first year because it may be the only person in the company is the L1 to begin with, so they have to do the work. But after 1 year, you better get out of it or you're going to get kicked out. All right, number 4 is you got to pay them what they're worth. All right, if you're a $3 million company and you send your executive over to the United States, you can't pay them $20,000. I mean, it's not corresponding to the executive aspect of their job. Their compensation has to be corresponding to the level of authority that they have within the company. So at a $3 million company, foreign company, you would expect an executive to be paid between $250,000 to $300,000 a year. There's flexibility. This is not a hard and fast rule, but check it, because if you send people over here and they're clearly underpaid, they're just not going to be ruled as executives and they'll be sent home. Number 5, I think it's pretty obvious. An executive or managerial person has to have the authority to bind the company, right? They got to have authority to bind the company. They need to be, executives, make decisions. In order to report this, you need to submit documentation that shows the job description, job qualifications, background of the managerial or executive person. And you need to show work product that shows that they are making these decisions, that they are binding the company, that they are authorizing work, that they are, you get the point. All right, so those are the 5 criteria that you need to have for the L1, I did it again, L1 executive. All right, now what's the other kind? Oh, look, I drew a line on that one too. So let's say we're not doing the executive, we're not doing the manager. What are we doing? The other L1 that you have is called specialized knowledge. Those people are not required to be executive. Rather, they're required to fit one of 3 categories. One is they need to be experts in market penetration. You may need to send somebody to the U.S. that has contacts and specialized understanding of how they're going to grow the business, right? And that person would more likely than not fit under the L1 specialized knowledge category. Category 2 is business process and product experts. Those are guys that know how to build your widgets. So if you make the world's best, I don't know, widget, and you want to start operations in the U.S., you need to send somebody here that knows how to build them and how to adapt them to this market. That's a product expert, researcher. You can send them over. The third one is a little different. It's internal controls or experts. Those people are ones that are used by the company to ensure that the internal operations are running correctly. Your CFO, your lead attorney, those types of things. You find them being brought here for specific tasks. One of the most common causes for us to bring them here is for those that have to deal with tax laws overseas. So the foreign company, of course, has to comply with U.S. tax law, but they also have to comply with foreign tax law. And sometimes you need somebody here that can look at the operations and see how to categorize things or write things down, and you send them here to work for a year or two to run that aspect of the business. All right, so those are that's your specialized knowledge. Understand, folks, that you don't really want to send people here under the specialized knowledge category. It's not because it's bad. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem is there's no future to it. They can only work here for a maximum of 5 years, and they have to go back home. Whereas an executive can work here and after 1 year get a green card. So it's much more advantageous to send people here as executives than it is to send them as specialized field knowledge. Make sure you talk to an attorney, of course, talk to us, in trying to set that up properly so you don't just get rejected. All right, now going down to slide number 10. Now, a few thoughts on this before we turn it over to questions. The first one is, remember that everything you submit, as long as you pass the blush test, which means that it's legally sufficient, you'll be approved for 1 year. 1 year. After that, you'll be audited. And if all the criteria I just ran down do not pass, your L will be rejected and they'll kick you out of the country. So every time we submit somebody for an L, we don't plan it as if we're just going to send in the bare requirements to get your 1 year. We plan this so that you can actually stay for the entire term of your L visa. That means documentation, documentation, documentation. You have got to prove your business is legitimate. You've got to prove where your money's coming from, and you have to prove the person you send to the U.S. has the qualifications that they need in order to actually take the job as an executive or somebody with specialized knowledge. Don't BS this. It'll end up badly. The final thing to point out is you can file for what's called premium processing. In that capacity, you can actually have this all adjudicated within 30 days if you pay the fee. Of course, it's all about money, right? So if you pay the fee, you can get it done. Now we're going to recap what this was all about, right? What did we talk about today? At our law firm, we frequently get people who come to us asking, how can you start an operation in the U.S.? You can invest $1 million. You can invest and try to partner with someone in the U.S. and, again, spend a lot of money to do that. That is, you have to show that you put in a substantial sum for that partnership in the e-visa category. It can be very expensive. Here, in an L visa, you have the opportunity with minimal expenses and actually to make money by opening a shop in the United States, funding it enough for you to be able to pay your employee's salary, that's really it, and send somebody here without any overhead costs for the person themselves. This is the cheapest and most surefire way to get somebody into the U.S. legally, working under the law, legally, and the fastest way to do it. You can get this whole thing turned around, starting your company, funding your company, getting the L1 data in, showing all your stuff. I'd say it takes max 90 days if you want to pay for premium processing, because we have to get the information together and send it in. But generally speaking, if you're motivated and you're ready to pay for this, we can get you in here within 90 days. This is the only means of doing it that quickly. It's the only means of getting people here so that they can work and work effectively, fairly cheaply. Now, one footnote to that, once an employee comes in and works in the U.S. for you, they can't change employers, all right? So they can't jump ship. If they jump ship, they're going to get booted. There are some exceptions to this, but by and large, they're stuck with you, and you're stuck with them. So if this is some kind of a way of hot swapping employees, it's not going to work very well. So talk to us if that's the goal, because there are different strategies that you want to have in mind if that's the target. So that concludes our direct presentation for today. I am happy to take questions at this point. I should note that to my left, you have Charlotte Hare. Say hello, Charlotte.
Hello.
And to my right, you have David Ahmed.
Hello.
And we are here to now respond to your inquiries about L1s and setting up shop in the U.S. If there are any questions. Okay, so I have a question from Barek, and it gives: can foreign corporations set up an LLC in the U.S. or it has to be a corporation? You're very welcome, everybody. Okay, so in response to that, the answer is no. A foreign corporation cannot set up an LLC in the U.S. because for an LLC to exist, 50% or more must be owned by a U.S. citizen, LPR, or company. Therefore, you could not meet the rule of it being your subsidiary because you would not own more than 1/2 of its operations. You must set up a C corporation. You're welcome. Any other questions? Cricket, cricket, cricket. Okay. All right, we have another question. We are a freight forwarding and logistics company and would like to have a branch in the U.S. So what do I do? Well, that's easy. Solomon, you hire us. You call us and you say, hey, I want to set up operations in the U.S. Okay, so there are different rules for import-export companies, so I'm not going to get into exactly what's involved in freight forwarding. I'm happy to discuss it with you offline because it would be extremely boring to everybody else who's not a freight forwarder. There are CBP papers you have to fill out when you're importing things and a bunch of different carp. So, but to respond about how you set something up in the United States, it follows the exact same rules I outlined in our presentation. So you're going to need to set up a subsidiary in the U.S. wholly owned by your foreign company. And they will set up shop in Baltimore, or in San Diego or Seattle or Boston, wherever it may be. And that's when you can send your L1 to actually run those freight forwarding operations. Be careful, though, because if you're just a bidder, so if you just go online and bid on contracts, but you're not actually the expediter, it can be hard to get an L1 approved because that doesn't require any particular skill. So you're going to want to talk to us about exactly what you do in freight forwarding as to what that qualifies as. But that's how you would do it. You set up your shop in a port city, and then you employ people. The key is making sure that it's a fully owned subsidiary of the parent. Good question. You're welcome. Here's the question. It was from Paul, and it says, does setting up of a U.S. office involve getting a director who is based in the U.S.? So the answer to that is no, it doesn't necessarily involve a director. I think that term you may be talking about is a corporate term for how you set up your company in the U.S. So what usually happens is you go through a law firm who will I'll answer the visa question in a second. You go through a law firm who is a proxy for you in running the company. And until you get set up in the U.S. where you have your own people as directors, we would do that for you. But we don't actually run any of the company. We just exist to hold the framework. That's why we recommend that you go through a law firm to do this and that you do not go through just a filing company on the web. So again, to get back to what you were saying, to set up the corporation in the U.S. does require a director. Typically that role is filled by the law firm that sets this up for you until you have set yourself up in the U.S. and can do it yourself. Okay, what advantage does an L visa give than an E? Okay, so an E covers a lot more territory actually, but the big difference is an L is based on a current company. So an L assumes there's a foreign company that wants to set up operations in the U.S. and that the employee, the L, is going to come and work for that company in the U.S. as a specialized skill or an executive. E-visas are really geared towards just the employee without being tied to any foreign company. You can come as an E2, which is a treaty investor, for example. You can buy into franchises or invest. You can come as an E3. So there are different criteria that are focused strictly on the would-be employee without any ties to a foreign company. But the major difference between the two is an L is much, much easier to get approved. And the reason for that is you're not coming to get a job in the U.S. You're coming to open operations in the U.S. that may lead to employment by U.S. people. And that's highly favored. So they want you to set up a branch of your foreign company in the U.S. to build business. And so they tend to approve these much more quickly than they do e-visas, which can be quite a long process. Good questions, both of you. You're very welcome. The question is, can your firm assist foreign company who wants to set up a branch in the U.S.? Yes. Fine. I'm not sure if you're trying to find a reliable partner, or if you're or if you're referring to us as a reliable partner. I don't know how reliable I am. Kind of crazy, but yeah, we certainly can assist you in doing this. We work with people around the U.S. and around the world to do just that in the U.S. So we have quite a bit of background in getting this done and getting people set up. both in a straightforward way. You know, it's a very straightforward. You want to set up your shop in the U.S. Here's how you do it. We file all the paperwork. We are your proxies to begin with, and then we go from there. Or if it gets more complex, you're trying to get a certain business function done, and you're not sure how to do it, so you want to talk to us about structuring things. We do that too. So you just have to tell us what you need. Okay, and then there's a question here. Is there going to be any change in business policies when the new government takes charge? You're very welcome, by the way. And the answer to that is, yeah, as I mentioned in the presentation, President Trump is not particularly keen on foreign immigration operations. Because of that, there's likely to be a lot more scrutiny on funding sources, where money's coming from, if people really have the qualifications to take the job, so forth and so on. Going back to what was asked before, an e-visa, ease, again, that was someone asked between the difference between an E and an L. An e-visa is going to get probably trimmed down tremendously as to who we're allowed to bring into the U.S. to work in U.S. businesses. However, an L visa will probably not be so affected, although it's going to be a lot more scrutiny, but they're not going to cut down on Ls. And the reason why, again, is you're bringing a foreign operation into the U.S. You're starting a new business, effectively, in the U.S. You're encouraging commerce and work. And likely, if you're successful, you'll be hiring people in the U.S. And we want more of that. So that's not likely to change. The only changes I see for L visas are the likelihood of higher scrutiny to ensure it's not terrorist funded and that the folks that come here are actually qualified. They're probably going to be a little more stringent on that. Good question. I think we may be. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions. Excellent. I've attended webinars to the U.S. I'm an hour away from you. Thank you. You're very welcome, and I'd be glad if you stopped by and said hi. So, Sushil Wright, I have software development company in Nepal and also want to establish one in the U.S. for doing marketing. Is that possible? Yes, it's absolutely possible. Talk to us if you send me an email. I'm going to write my email up on the screen here. You guys can contact me about that. I think you may have gotten it, but if you didn't, oh my goodness, this is going to be messy. Okay, so it's, yeah, there we go. You know what, forget that. That's just like the shorter version of this. Can I cut and paste this? Like I'm writing in crayon. This is a terrible idea. Here's another thing. If you go to our website that you see down there or you call us, we can help you with that question about trying to set something up in the U.S. Of course you can set things up in the U.S. We do this all the time. Our website has an email contact. I'll give it to you now. It's there. You can also email us and share this with anybody that needs help, and we're more than happy to do it. Oh, there you go. There you go. So again, we're glad to do that. Any other questions? Oh, you're very welcome. I'm here to serve. That's what we do. Get the job done. All right, guys. So I'm going to wrap it up now. I hope this was helpful to you, including my crayon drawings at the top there. And if you guys need any help or you know anybody that needs help in this field, please feel free to contact us. We'd be delighted to do that.
Next 7 working days.
Okay.
Same with his contact information. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Sean.
Take care. Take care.